Now with that, if we go to the next screen, where we have a running game, we face the next problem there. In portrait mode, it looks good, but if we rotate the device, then this doesn't look too good. Now here, a solution simply could be that we change the styling a little bit if we don't have that much height available. Alternatively, we render a totally different layout based on the available space. Both would be options you have. You could, for example, try to render this side by side by simply adding a if check here in your game screen where you return totally different JSX code and maybe also with totally different styling and therefore layouting based on the available width or height. And then you would just need to set up a listener that re-renders your component, so with set state, just as we did it here in the start game screen, to re-render your component whenever that's the case. I think that would be kind of interesting, and therefore that's something I'll do here. What I'll do is I want to render my buttons here to the left and the right of the number container if we only have a limited height available, and render it like we always did if that's not the case. So I want to render totally different JSX code based on my dimensions. So here I'll add a if check and say if dimensions get window height, let's say if that's smaller than 500, and we'll see if that value works, then I want to return basically this JSX code from down there. So I'll copy that, put it between brackets here, parentheses. But I don't want to have my card here. Instead, I'll have the first main button before my number container, the next one after the number container, and I'll have all of that inside of a new view here, which I'll wrap around this, which should lay these three things out in a row. So I'll add a brand new style here. Styles, let's say controls or whatever you want to name it. And now I add this to my style sheet here. And that's the same style sheet as before because it just sets up styles that I can use anywhere in my component, no matter under which conditions I render what. And here I'll set this flex direction to row. The default is column, and now we want to have a row here. And I'll set justify content to space around. And we'll see how that looks like. If we now save this and we start a new game here in landscape mode, doesn't look too bad, still some work to do, but this is now what I get here in landscape mode or on devices with limited height. On devices with more height, I still get the old view here, which is of course exactly what I want. Now let's fix this view here. And therefore we can simply go to controls and give that a width of, let's say, 80% so that the overall container is bigger. And very important, set align items here to center so that the number container and the two buttons are all centered vertically. And now with that, if we give that another try here, we enter this. This looks way better. And it works in the same way as before, but now we have a different layout based on our dimensions. Now, of course, the problem is this layout doesn't change if we rotate. Not the end of the world, but we might want to change back to that old layout. And you learned how that works. We just need to manage this with state and set up a listener. Now I already have use state and use effect here in the game screen, so all we need to do in our game screen component is start by setting up that state here. And in the end, what we want to manage here is our device width, which changes over time. Maybe name this available device width to make it clear that we're not setting the device width here, we're just setting the detected device width. You could therefore also name this detected device width. I'll name it available device width and set available device width. And manage this with use state, where I use dimensions get window width to get the available device width. And of course, I just recognized this is wrong. We're interested in the height, not in the width. But we'll need the width as well for this check here, so we'll need both. So we have the available device width, and I'll also manage another state here. That's our available device height. Here also, this is set available device height, and therefore here initially we get the available device height. And now we need to change both when our orientation changes. For that, we can use a fact, for example, here. Set up a function that runs whenever our component re-renders. And in this function here, I'll set up dimensions, add event listener, listen to change events, and set up a function which should trigger when that's the case. Update layout, for example, is a fitting name because that's exactly what we're doing. And in there, I call set available device width, and I set this to dimensions get window dot width. And of course, also set available device height to dimensions get window height. Update layout is therefore the function we point at on our event listener on dimensions. And just as before, we need a cleanup function to avoid unnecessary re-renders. And in this function, we simply use dimensions, remove event listener, change where we point at update layout, and we're good. Now we just need to use our two states here, available device width and available device height. So in this if check here, I use available device width, and here, where I'm interested in the height, I use available device height. If we now save this, we should have a layout where if we start a game, we have this look, but if we then rotate into landscape mode, this changes. And it, of course, also changes back if it needs to. Here on iOS, we have this look, and we have this look if we rotate. So now this is really looking good. And this is giving us the look we want based on the available width and height, and it also respects changes to that when we rotate the device.